You've probably seen the video. A rocket flying itself back down out of the sky and landing standing straight up, like it's rewinding. That booster reached 2,400 meters per second on the way up, over 7 times the speed of sound. It climbed 80 kilometers, almost to the edge of space. Then it turned around, flew itself back down, and landed upright on a circle of concrete within a few meters of its target. That's remarkable on its own. Later in this video, it happens twice at once. 2 boosters landing on separate pads in the exact same instant. How does it actually do that? For the first 60 years of spaceflight, every rocket was one-time use. Build it, launch it, watch it fall into the ocean, build another. In December 2015, a Falcon 9 first stage landed itself intact for the first time. A decade on, SpaceX boosters land successfully on roughly 97% of attempts. And nearly every one of those landings traces back to one principle. Point the engines down. Fire at exactly the right moment. Use thrust to cancel velocity, instead of letting heat and parachutes do it. The same Newton's third law that launched the rocket, run backwards, on purpose, under total computer control. Simple in principle, brutally hard in execution. So what's actually happening between engine cutoff and touchdown? Phase 1. Boostback burn. The booster flips around and cancels its sideways motion. Phase 2. Re-entry burn. Falling at supersonic speed, the engines fire again to survive the thickening air. Phase 3. Aerodynamic guidance. Grid fins steer the falling booster like a skydiver, adjusting their body. Phase 4. Landing burn and touchdown. One engine, precisely throttled, brings 25 tons of steel to a dead stop right on the pad. Engineers call the whole maneuver propulsive landing, the single innovation that made rocket reuse possible. That single innovation didn't just solve an engineering problem, it solved an economic one. Today's most flown Falcon 9 booster has launched more than 35 times. And the record keeps climbing, with turnaround dropping from months to, in some cases, under 2 weeks, pushing launch cadence from a handful of flights a year to well over 100. Here's why that matters economically. The first stage, the part that lands and flies again, represents the majority of a Falcon 9's total build cost. By recovering and reflying it, SpaceX skips rebuilding the most expensive part of the rocket on every launch. Refurbishment costs a small fraction of a new booster versus the fully expendable rockets of the 20th century, rebuilt from scratch every time. Reusability didn't just change how rockets land. It changed how often humanity can afford to go to space. None of that is possible unless the landing itself works, every time. So here's exactly how it happens, phase by phase. The first thing that happens after stage separation is counterintuitive. The booster doesn't just fall. It flies backward, over its own launch path. After releasing the upper stage, it's still traveling sideways at over 1,500 meters per second. Do nothing, and it lands hundreds of kilometers downrange in the ocean. So 3 of its 9 engines reignite, pointing it back the way it came. This single burn, lasting under a minute, cancels almost all of that sideways velocity and bends the path back toward the landing zone. Without it, return to launch site landings simply don't exist. The booster would be traveling the wrong direction. Here's the question almost everyone asks. Why doesn't the booster just slowly hover its way down like a video game lander? It comes down to one ratio: thrust to weight. A nearly empty Falcon 9 booster weighs around 25 tons. A single Merlin engine, at minimum throttle, still produces more thrust than that. Even at its lowest setting, one engine produces more upward force than the booster weighs. It physically cannot hover, only ever accelerate up or accelerate down. So instead of hovering, the booster threads a single burn to hit zero velocity and zero altitude at the exact same instant. A maneuver nicknamed, only half-jokingly, the suicide burn. After boostback, the booster is in freefall, heading straight for a wall of air. Falling from 80 kilometers, it accelerates back toward the speed of sound and beyond. Hitting the thickening lower atmosphere at full speed would tear it apart. So a second burn, the re-entry burn, fires 3 engines for several seconds, punching through the supersonic shockwave forming ahead of the vehicle. Then 4 titanium grid fins unfold near the top. Here's the counterintuitive part. The booster isn't falling straight down. It's deliberately falling at a slight angle, using its own body like a wing, and the fins constantly adjust that angle, steering a 47-meter cylinder through the sky the way you'd steer a thrown dart, all while still moving faster than sound. Now the moment that decides everything. Every landing threads the same velocity versus altitude curve. Ascent, boostback, freefall, then a final plunge where both velocity and altitude hit zero at the same instant. Get that timing wrong by even half a second, and the booster runs out of fuel mid-air or slams into the pad. At around 1.5 kilometers above the pad, falling at roughly 300 meters per second, the center engine reignites. Unlike the earlier burns, this one isn't fixed length. The flight computer solves a real-time equation continuously. Given current velocity, altitude, and fuel, exactly when must this engine light to reach 0 and 0 together? The engine throttles from a hard deceleration, burned down to barely hovering thrust. Landing legs deploy in the final seconds. The whole burn lasts under 30 seconds. There is no second attempt. How does the booster stay upright through all of this? No wings, no pilot. The Merlin engine is mounted on a gimbal, a hinge letting the whole engine tilt a few degrees in any direction. If the booster starts to lean, the flight computer tilts the nozzle to redirect thrust off-center, pushing it back upright. Dozens of times per second through the entire descent. Near the top, small, cold gas thrusters fire in the opposite direction, fine-tuning orientation where the air is too thin for grid fins to work. Between the Gimbaling engine below and the thrusters above, the booster has full attitude control from the edge of space to the pad. What does the bottom of the booster actually survive? During the re-entry burn, exhaust plumes interact directly with incoming supersonic air, supersonic retropropulsion, and the engine section can see localized heating exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius for brief periods. A thermal protection blanket shields the surrounding structure and avionics. The octaweb, the ring holding all 9 engines, is machined aluminum and titanium, chosen for how it handles rapid heating and cooling cycles. The grid fins themselves are cast titanium, not aluminium, which would lose strength at hypersonic flight temperatures. The result: a structure that survives launch, space, re-entry heat, and landing, precise and repeatable enough to do it right the first time and every time after. Here's what that precision looks like when 2 boosters have to pull it off at once. One specific moment, February 6, 2018, the maiden launch of Falcon Heavy. Falcon Heavy straps 2 extra Falcon 9 boosters to a center core, nearly tripling standard launch thrust. Both side boosters separated, flipped, performed their boostback burns, and fell back toward Cape Canaveral. Independently, on separate trajectories. 8 minutes after liftoff, they landed. Both of them at the same time, one on landing zone 1, the other a few hundred meters away on landing zone 2. Two 47-meter boosters falling from space, landing seconds apart on two different pads, guided by two separate onboard computers solving the same suicide burn equation, independently and correctly. Boostback, re-entry, aerodynamic guidance, landing burn. 4 phases, 1 principle. Thrust canceling velocity, timed to the fraction of a second. Roughly 97% landing success on a maneuver with zero margin for error. A single engine throttled in real time, threading a falling steel tube onto a target a few meters wide. And a thrust-to-weight ratio so unforgiving that hovering was never an option, only a perfectly timed leap of faith. Landing a rocket safely is one unforgiving control problem. But splitting an atom to generate the electricity that could one day power the factories building the next generation of these boosters is a different kind of unforgiving entirely, and just as precise. How nuclear reactors generate electricity, next on EngiSimple. Subscribe to EngiSimple so you don't miss it.